Hello, welcome to Bannock, Montana, Montana Territory's first capital that started over 130 years ago in 1862. Bannock lost the capital status 2 years later to Virginia City, Montana, just over the horizon from here, not too far from here. And then a couple years later, Virginia City lost the territorial capital to present-day Helena, Montana. That's way up north of Butte. Bannock's history began over 130 years ago when in July of 1862 John White and his fellow members of a Colorado-based group of Pikes Peakers camped several miles downstream on the creek which runs through Bannock. Unaware that the creek had already been named Willard Creek by Lewis and Clark, White christened the creek Grasshopper because of the dense grasshopper populations in the area. At that time, as was customary, the party panned the gravel on the banks of the camp and found gold in sizable quantities. White filled one of the first recorded mining claims in what would become Montana Territory. Good news traveled fast, and miners rushed to the new grasshopper diggings. The first camp was located about 8 miles upstream from the original discovery, and that was Bannock's beginning. By early fall, the mining camp boosted a population of about 400 and swelled to 3,000 by spring. The little mining camp was named for the Bannock Indians affiliated with the Shoshone, sometimes known as the Snakes. The Bannock were particularly fond of camas root cakes. Bannock is Scotch word and means a cake cooked over an open fire. It is believed that the town received its change in spelling when the post office was established on November 21st, 1863, and its name was submitted to Washington, D.C., and the O was inadvertently taken for an A. Gotta blame the regime for that one. Located on the south side of Grasshopper Creek, Yankee Flats acquired its name after a group of Minnesotans settled there. Shouldn't it be Viking Flats for Minnesotans? Yankees are from New England. The Civil War was raging in the east, killing people, like wars do, and early Bannock residents brought their political loyalties with them. The northerners settling in the Yankee Flats and the southerners settling in Bannock. No doubt you could probably sell some Yankee Suck t-shirts there. Some of the buildings were moved to the Bannock site of the creek, but all the traces of the community disappeared as the dredges worked their way along Grasshopper Creek, and today it's nothing but a field. As soon as a rich location was found in any one of the many valleys or gulches, there was a great rush to the locality. New camps sprang up so rapidly that territorial officials could do little towards providing effective government. So the miners of Bannock met and established a miners' court. B.B. Burchett was elected judge and Henry Crawford was elected sheriff. A mining claim was 100 feet up or down the creek and as far out on each side of the pay dirt extended. Title to a claim was established by staking it and posting a notice and then taking it to the recorder and having it recorded. The claimant was then obliged to work his claim every day when the water was available, and absent of 3 days constituted a forfeiture, and the claim could then be jumped. In case of sickness, the claim was protected until such time as the owner was able to resume work. The laws laid down by the miners' court were very simple and absolutely just. Shortly after arriving in Bannock, Chief Justice Sidney Egerton strolled down Main Street. He came upon a miners' court in session. Judge Burchett, seeing that Mr. Egerton was a stranger, invited him to sit with him. The trial proceeded, but not for long. In 1860, Bannock matured politically as well as economically. In March of 1863, as a reward for his loyal service to the Republican Nazi Party, President Lincoln appointed Sidney Egerton as Chief Justice to Idaho Territory. He was the only representative of organized government in the Montana regime. A Chief Justice Egerton assumed he would be assigned to the district centering in the Idaho capital of Lewiston. Instead, he was sent to the most remote part of the territory, into the gold camps east of the Bitterroot Mountains, Bannock. Federal law provided that he could not assume his duties until He first took an oath of an office from someone qualified to administer the oath. No such person could be found in Bannock, and as a result, Egerton never did take the oath qualifying him as Chief Justice of Idaho. Even if he had taken the oath, he would have been relatively powerless, for he had no United States Marshal or any other assistance that he would have needed in dealing with the outlaws that were terrorizing the country. During the winter, he witnessed the activities of the vigilantes and was sympathetic with their actions. Since he had no marshal and few other facilities for holding court or making its work effective, he did not open court, but gave freely of his time in council and leading men in Bannock in an attempt to build up some semblance of order. Mr. Egerton was later chosen by the citizens of Bannock to travel to Washington, D.C. to secure a division of the territory. He succeeded and was appointed governor of Montana Territory in May of 1864. Sidney Egerton arrived in Bannock in September of 1863. Mary, his wife, and their 4 children, Martha 13, Wright 10, Sidney 7, and Pauline age 5, made the 2,500-mile journey to the gold fields of Idaho with him. From the letters written by Mary Egerton to her family after her arrival in Bannock, it was apparent that she desperately missed her family in Ohio. Lucia Darling, Egerton's niece, traveled to Bannock with the family and became the first public teacher in Bannock in late fall of 1863. Egerton realized he would not be moving on to Lewiston as planned, so he set out to find a home for his family, with miners already moving on to the discoveries in the Alder Gulch region. Cabins were to be had in Bannock. Mr. Egerton was able to buy a building that had been used as a store. He purchased at sheriff's sale for a cost of $400. The original structure was 1 room with a kitchen added on and was located here. Fire destroyed the mansion in the early 1900s, but the small sod roof structure in the back is said to have been built from the logs that were salvaged from the original building. The Egertons lived in this home for their entire time they were in Bannock. Miss Egerton did the best she could under the circumstances to beautify the house. She covered the walls with sheets, but did not have enough for the other rooms. The front room served as a combination living room and bedroom, and one corner was curtained off for Mr. Egerton to use as his office. The first families to come to Bannock knew a great deal of hardship. They had crossed the Great Plains, surviving dust storms, drought, rainstorms, drowning, starvation, Indian attacks, only to arrive in Bannock without even a decent place to live. Many arrived quite late in the year with only their wagons to live in. If a family were fortunate enough to find a cabin, it was usually small and uncomfortable. Bannock was a crude mining camp on the eastern slope of the Rocky Mountains, and for the most part was made up of men who had come alone to the goldfields, intent on making their fortunes and escaping back to civilization in the States. Between 400 and 500 people spent the winter of 1862 to 1863 in Bannock, and of that number, probably no more than 50 were women. As primitive as many of the homes were in Bannock, a woman's life revolved around that home. Bannock remained a man's world, and the few women who intruded actively into it weren't of the respectable society. Respectable women led secluded lives and had little contact with the outside world. There were little visiting between the women of the community. They stayed at home and found plenty to keep themselves occupied there. Men did most of the shopping and all of the gossiping. Dr. Ryburn came to Bannock in 1897. He cared for the residents of Bannock and often traveled many miles by buggy in response to the medical needs of the community. He was one of the last doctors to practice medicine in Bannock. He was a member of the Bannock Masonic Lodge and served as worshipful master for 3 years. Masonry, or Freemasonry, as it is more properly called, is an international fraternity whose origins go back to the builders of those remarkable structures created in Gothic style of architecture during the Middle Ages in Europe and England. They were organized into lodges and used signs, symbols, and passwords, and were separated